15th, September 1940. EO 9:24 a.m. Southern England. George Unwin is about to die. His Spitfire plunges through broken clouds at 380 miles per hour. 3 Bf-109s lock onto his tail, closing fast. Their Daimler-Benz engines scream. His canopy rattles. The stick vibrates in his gloved hands. Unwin has no altitude left, no speed advantage, no room to turn, no escape. He has one choice left: to maneuver every manual forbids. Unwin shoves the stick forward, hard. The Spitfire rolls inverted and dives into a -G bunt. His stomach lifts. His vision grays. The Merlin engine coughs once, then dies. The gravity-fed carburetor starves fuel pooling uselessly as the world flips upside down. For 3 seconds, he flies a 7,000-pound glider, silent, falling, helpless. The 109s overshoot their fuel-injected engines, purring smoothly through the dive. Unwin levels out, holds his breath. The Merlin catches with a brutal roar. He's alive. Below him, London burns under the Luftwaffe's heaviest daylight raid. Smoke columns rise from shattered docks, pulverized streets. Homes turn to rubble. If Britain loses the air today, German invasion barges will cross the Channel within 2 weeks. One forbidden maneuver, one dying engine, one man's split-second gamble holding the fate of an island in his trembling hands. What happens when the only way to survive is to kill your own engine and pray it restarts before the ground arrives? What happens when survival depends on breaking every rule written in your own manual? In 1933, Germany tears up the Treaty of Versailles. The Luftwaffe rises from the shadows, modern, aggressive, built for war. Messerschmitt Bf-109s roll off secret assembly lines with fuel-injected DB-601 engines that never falter, never choke, never die in a dive. German pilots train in Spain's Civil War, refining tactics British flyers have never encountered. While Britain debates and delays, Germany builds. Britain scrambles to respond. 2 prototypes emerge, the Hurricane and the Spitfire. The Hawker Hurricane arrives first, rugged, fabric-covered, mass-producible. 8 303 machine guns. Rock-steady gun platform, but slow. Heavy, vulnerable in vertical maneuvers. The Supermarine Spitfire follows elliptical wings, razor-handling, breathtaking speed. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin, a 27-liter masterpiece that produces 1,130 horsepower and sounds like thunder. But the Merlin has a fatal flaw. Its carburetor feeds fuel by gravity. Push -G, flip inverted bunt into a dive, and fuel stops flowing. The engine starves, dies. For 3, 4, sometimes 5 seconds, the pilot flies a glider while enemy fighters with fuel injection keep firing. German pilots discover this weakness within weeks. They exploit it ruthlessly. Test pilots report the problem to Rolls-Royce. Engineers propose modifications, fuel injection systems, pressurized carburetors. But retooling production lines will take months. Fighter command doesn't have months. So pilots learn to fight with one hand tied behind their backs. Never push -G, never follow a 109 into a dive. Accept the disadvantage or die. In 1939, Poland falls in 27 days. Luftwaffe Stukas and 109s obliterate airfields before Polish pilots can scramble. Entire squadrons burn on the ground, destroyed before they ever take off. France collapses in 6 weeks. The Armée de l'Air, once Europe's largest air force, ceases to exist. Modern German fighters sweep antiquated French aircraft from the sky in days. By summer 1940, Britain stands alone. Fighter Command musters fewer than 700 operational fighters. Across the Channel, the Luftwaffe fields over 2,800 aircraft. Bombers, fighters, dive bombers, and armada assembled on captured French airfields, barely 20 minutes flying time from London. The math is brutal. The odds impossible. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring promises Hitler he will destroy the RAF in 4 weeks. Then Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, will proceed. German divisions wait along the French coast. Invasion barges are loaded. The Wehrmacht is ready. All that stands between them and Britain is a few hundred exhausted pilots flying temperamental aircraft. Airfields burn, radar stations crumble under bombing. Ground crews work 18-hour shifts in the open patching bullet holes, refueling, rearming, dragging wrecks off cratered runways. They sleep under wings, eat cold rations, work until their hands bleed. Pilots fly 3, 4, sometimes 5 sorties per day. They land, gulp tea with shaking hands, refuel, take off again into the same sky they barely escaped minutes before. Sleep becomes a luxury measured in minutes. Food an afterthought. Fear a constant companion that never sleeps. The Luftwaffe attacks in waves, 50, 100, sometimes 300 aircraft at once. The sound alone is terrifying, a mechanical thunder that drowns out thought. Radar stations along the coast, the chain home network detect incoming raids and flash warnings to Fighter Command headquarters. Controllers plot enemy formations on massive tables, pushing wooden blocks across maps with long rakes, calculating vectors, altitudes, intercept times. They buy minutes, sometimes only seconds. And in those seconds, young men must decide whether they have enough time to reach altitude, enough fuel to engage, enough ammunition to matter. Keith Park commands the 11 group responsible for defending London and the southeast. He stands in the operations room at Uxbridge watching colored blocks move across the map. Each block represents a squadron. Each squadron 12 aircraft. Each aircraft one exhausted pilot. He watches his pilots land with oil-streaked faces and shaking hands. He reads the daily loss reports, names crossed off bunks, emptied personal effects boxed and shipped home. He knows the mathematics of attrition. At this rate, Fighter Command will cease to exist within 3 weeks. The Luftwaffe doesn't need to shoot down every British fighter. It just needs to break the will to keep flying. To make young men too exhausted, too frightened, too broken to climb back into burning cockpits one more time. And it's working. Pilots land between sorties and vomit from exhaustion. Some fall asleep standing up during briefings. Others refuse to let go of their aircraft, convinced that if they walk away, they'll never find the courage to return. Replacement pilots arrive daily, boys with barely 20 hours in Spitfires. They receive a 5-minute briefing, a pat on the shoulder, and orders to scramble. Half are dead within 48 hours. They never learn their squadron mates' names. Their squadron mates never learn theirs. It hurts less that way. The pressure is unbearable, the odds insurmountable. But still, every morning they climb back into their cockpits. Because if they don't, Britain falls. And if Britain falls, the war is lost. But how do you keep fighting when every scramble might be your last and the enemy outnumbers you 4-1? In July 1940, the killing begins in earnest. Luftwaffe bombers strike Channel convoys in broad daylight. Hurricanes scramble from coastal airfields, engines screaming as they claw for altitude. They reach the bombers and open fire. Point 303 rounds spark off armored fuselages. Tracers bounce away like fireflies. The bullets are too small, too weak. Pilots watch their ammunition counters spin to zero while enemy bombers fly on untouched. They close the range. 200 yards. 150. Suicidal distance. Now the rounds punch through. Engines smoke, wings shred, bombers fall. But closing to killing range means flying through defensive fire from a dozen gun positions. Hurricanes return with shattered canopies, severed control cables, dead pilots slumped in cockpits. Pilots wrestle stiff controls, learning in combat what no manual ever taught. The Hurricane's ailerons stiffen at high speed. The rudder barely responds. Every maneuver demands muscle sweat desperation. Above the bombers, Spitfires dual Bf-109 escorts at 20,000 feet. They turn and turn and turn again, tight spirals, wingtip to wingtip, each pilot trying to slide onto the other's tail. But the 109s have one unbeatable move. They flip inverted and dive. Their fuel-injected engines never falter. Spitfire pilots watch them go, knowing if they follow their Merlins will die. By the time the engine restarts, the 109 is gone or worse, climbing back up for another pass. The flaw kills men daily. In August, the Luftwaffe shifts targets. Now they hit the airfields themselves. Manston, Biggin Hill, Kinley, Tangmere, North Weald. Bombs rain down every afternoon like clockwork. Runways crater. Hangars collapse into twisted metal. Ground crew die at their posts, cut down by strafing 109s. Pilots take off through smoke and debris wheels, lifting over rubble still glowing red. Johnny Johnson lands at Kinley between raids. His hands shake so badly he can barely unbuckle his harness. Ground crew swarm his Spitfire patching fabric torn by bullets, topping off fuel-loading fresh ammunition belts. He climbs out. His legs won't hold him. A corporal catches his arm. "Cup of tea, sir." Johnson nods. The corporal presses a tin mug into his hands. The tea is cold. Johnson drinks it anyway. His third sortie since dawn. His fuel gauge had read 0 when he touched down. 20 minutes, sir, then back up." Johnson stares at the sky. Empty now. Silent. It won't stay that way. Douglas Bader leads his squadron into the teeth of bomber formations, head-on attacks closing at combined speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. Wings fill his gun sight. He fires. Pulls up. The bombers flash past so close he can see the faces of German gunners. Bader has no legs lost in a pre-war crash, 10 legs strapped to his stumps. But those artificial limbs give him an edge no one predicted. During high G turns, blood doesn't pool in his lower body. He stays conscious when others black out. He can turn tighter, pull harder, fight longer. But courage cannot stop machine gun bullets. Every day pilots vanish. Some bail out over the channel. Parachutes drift down onto gray water. Rescue boats race toward them, but the channel is wide and cold. Many drown before help arrives. Others burn. Fuel tanks ignite. Cockpits become furnaces. Pilots claw at jammed canopies, screaming trapped. The lucky ones crash land in fields. Farmers pull them from smoking wreckage, dazed, bleeding, grateful to be alive, guilty for surviving when friends did not. Empty bunks multiply. At breakfast, chairs sit unused. At briefings, fewer pilots stand for roll call. Replacements arrive with logbooks showing 10 hours in Spitfires. Barely enough time to learn the landing pattern. Not enough to survive combat. They die on their second mission, sometimes their first. Funerals become routine. Letters to families pile up on commanding officers' desks. Young men are buried in country churchyards while new pilots move into their bunks before the sheets are changed. Runways burn, nerves fray, sleep disappears. In September, Goering makes his final gamble. He orders the Luftwaffe to abandon airfield attacks and concentrate everything on London. Massive daylight raids, hundreds of bombers escorted by swarms of fighters will break British morale. The city will burn. The government will sue for peace. 15th of September 1940, the day George Unwin's engine died and restarted. The Luftwaffe launches its largest raid yet. Over 1,000 aircraft darken the sky. Fighter Command scrambles everything that can fly. Every squadron, every pilot. Every aircraft with fuel and ammunition. Hurricanes tear into bomber formations at point-blank range. Spitfires duel escorts in swirling dogfights that stretch from the Channel to the outskirts of London. Pilots land, refuel, rearm, take off again. Some fly 4 times, some 5, some never return. By sunset, the Luftwaffe has lost 56 aircraft. The RAF loses 29 fighters, but most pilots survive parachuting or crash landing. 2 days later, Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion will not happen. Britain has survived, but the war in the air is far from over. In 1941, the Allies go on the offensive. RAF bombers strike targets in occupied Europe. Losses are staggering. Without long-range fighter escorts, German fighters tear formations apart. Entire squadrons vanish in single missions. American volunteers join the fight, then full US AAF units. In 1942, the 8th Air Force arrives in England B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, massive 4-engine bombers bristling with 50 caliber machine guns. American doctrine promises they can fight their way to any target and back without escorts. The theory is elegant. The reality is carnage. Over Schweinfurt, 60 bombers go down in a single mission. Over Regensburg, formations return with half their aircraft missing. Survivors land with dead crewmen still strapped in their positions, blood frozen on shattered gun mounts. American fighter pilots fly P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings, powerful, deadly, but shackled by range. They escort bombers to the German border, then watch fuel gauges drop into the red. They turn back. The bombers continue alone into Germany. FW-190s and Bf-109s swarm them. Bombers explode, tumble, disintegrate. Parachutes blossom white dots against gray clouds. Most are dead before they hit the ground. Mission losses climb past 20%, then 25%. Crews are declared KIA after 25 missions because few survive that long. Men refuse to fly. Courts-martial follow, morale collapses. Engineers work frantically. Bigger drop tanks, modified fuel systems, anything to extend fighter range, but the math remains brutal. Fighters burn fuel 3 times faster in combat. No amount of tinkering can change physics. The air campaign teeters on the edge of failure. Losses are unsustainable. Bomber production cannot replace aircraft fast enough. Pilot training cannot keep pace with casualties. Something must change or the war in the air will be lost. But when physics says it's impossible and men are dying by the hundreds, where do you find a miracle? The air war becomes a chessboard of life and death played at 400 miles per hour. Keith Park commands 11 Group from a bunker beneath Uxbridge. On the operations table before him, colored blocks represent fighter squadrons. Plotters push them across the map with long wooden rakes tracking every movement in real time. His doctrine is brutal in its simplicity: scramble fast. Hit hard, break off before fuel runs out. No grand formations, no elegant tactics, just speed and violence. Radar stations along the coast flash warnings. German formations inbound. Park calculates intercept vectors in his head altitude, heading time to contact. He picks up the telephone. Scramble 242 Squadron, Vector 090, Angels 20. Pilots sprint to their aircraft. Engines cough, catch roar. Spitfires lift off within 3 minutes of the call. 3 minutes. Sometimes it's enough. Sometimes it isn't. Trafford Lee Mallory commands 12 Group to the north. He despises Park's methods. Too cautious. Too small scale. He advocates big wing tactics, assembling 3, 4, 5 squadrons into massive formations before engaging. More fighters, more firepower, overwhelming force. The theory is sound. The execution is deadly. Big wings take 20 minutes to form. By the time they arrive, German bombers have already hit their targets. Park's squadrons fight alone, outnumbered, bleeding. The debate rages at every command meeting. Voices rise, fists pound tables, but men die while generals argue. Park's method wins by default because his fighters arrive first. Across the Atlantic, American tacticians dissect every loss, every engagement, every failed mission. The P-47 Thunderbolt arrives in Europe as a monster. 7 tons of radial engine and armor plating. 8 50 caliber machine guns. Pilots call it the Jug, short for Juggernaut. It cannot turn with a 109, cannot climb with a 190. But it can do something no German fighter can match. It dives. At 30,000 feet, a Thunderbolt pilot spots German fighters below circling bomber formations like sharks. He pushes the stick forward. The Jug accelerates 450 miles per hour, 550. Mass and gravity become weapons. He slashes through the German formation guns, hammering. FW-190 scatter. By the time they react, the Thunderbolt is already gone, climbing away on pure momentum, resetting for another pass. Fred Christensen perfects this tactic into an art form. Dive. Fire a 2-second burst. Zoom climb before return fire arrives. Repeat. His wingmen copy him. Losses drop. Kill ratios improve. The P-38 Lightning enters service with a different advantage: twin-boomed, twin-engined, nose-mounted cannons and machine guns firing through the propeller arc. No convergence point to calculate, no guesswork, just aim and fire. Jack Ilfrey exploits this ruthlessly. He stalks German formations at medium altitude where the Lightning's twin Allisons perform best. When the moment comes, he closes to 300 yards and holds the trigger down. Shells and bullets converge into a single stream of destruction. German fighters explode, disintegrate, fall, but still the fundamental problem remains unsolved. Range. A Thunderbolt carries 305 gallons of internal fuel. At cruise power, that's good for 475 miles. Add two 108-gallon drop tanks and the range extends to 800 miles, but combat burns fuel 3 times faster. Every minute of dogfighting drains the tanks. Every burst of throttle shortens the margin. Pilots memorize fuel curves like prayers. Gallons to the drop tanks. Gallons to target. Gallons reserved for combat. Gallons for the flight home. One miscalculation means ditching in the North Sea or dying over Germany. Engineers attack the problem from every angle. Bigger drop tanks, modified internal plumbing, fuel tank sealant that saves weight. Every improvement buys a few more miles, a few more minutes. Ground crews become alchemists. They tweak Merlin engines, pushing boost pressure beyond factory limits, seeking extra inches of manifold pressure, extra seconds of combat power before the engine grenades itself. Propeller pitch adjustments, fuel mixture ratios, oil cooler modifications, anything for 5 more miles per hour, 2 more minutes of power. Squadron commanders issue standing orders: don't chase damaged aircraft, don't pursue fleeing fighters, don't burn fuel on revenge, bomber escort only. Nothing else matters. Pilots land with fuel gauges reading 0. Engines cough and die on taxiways. Some run dry on final approach, gliding the last mile to the runway. The Luftwaffe adapts too. German aces, survivors of 3 years of combat, learn to avoid Thunderbolt dives and Lightning head-ons. They attack from below, climbing out of the sun, exploiting blind spots under bomber fuselages. They target stragglers, damaged bombers with smoking engines limping home alone. They wait for Allied fighters to turn back, then strike with impunity. Every improvement the Allies make, the Germans counter. Every tactic refined, every procedure perfected, matched by experienced pilots who refuse to die easily. Attrition grinds both sides. But Germany's pilot training system begins to fracture. Fuel shortages curtail advanced instruction. Training flights are cut from 250 hours to 150, then to 100. Replacements arrive at frontline squadrons with 30 hours in type. They die within days, sometimes hours. The Allies cycle pilots through rest periods, 2 weeks off every 6 weeks of combat. Replacement training schools run continuously. Tactical instruction improves with every lesson learned in blood. The system holds, barely. And then in late 1943, engineers make a breakthrough no one predicted. Not a new weapon, not a new tactic, a redesign. What if the solution wasn't inventing something new, but fixing something everyone had already dismissed as hopeless? In October 1943, an ungainly aircraft lands at a British test facility, the North American P-51 Mustang. Originally designed for low-altitude ground attack, powered by an Allison engine that gasps above 15,000 feet. The RAF tested early models and dismissed them as inadequate for high-altitude combat. Good for reconnaissance, useless for escorting bombers into Germany. The aircraft sits in a hangar, a rejected prototype, gathering dust while men die overhead. But someone asks a dangerous question: what if we replace the Allison with a Merlin? It's a radical idea. The Mustang's airframe was designed around the Allison. Swapping engines means redesigning mounts, cooling systems, fuel lines. Months of work. No guarantee of success. But desperation breeds innovation. Rolls-Royce engineers strip out the Allison and install the Merlin 61, 2-stage supercharged high-altitude, optimize the same engine that transformed the Spitfire into a legend. They modify engine mounts. reroute coolant lines, recalculate weight and balance. The first test flight occurs on a cold November morning. The test pilot climbs to 10,000 feet, then 20,000, then 30,000. The Mustang accelerates like nothing he's ever flown. The transformation is immediate and profound. The Mustang's sleek airframe, low-drag, laminar flow wings, combined with the Merlin's power, creates a fighter that climbs like a Spitfire, dives like a Thunderbolt, and cruises with fuel efficiency no one anticipated. At 25,000 feet, it's faster than a FW190. At 30,000 feet, it outperforms a BF109, and it does this while burning 20% less fuel than any comparable fighter. Engineers run the calculations again. The numbers seem impossible. Then someone suggests adding drop tanks. Not the standard 75-gallon tanks, bigger ones. Much bigger. They design 108-gallon tanks, sleek, aerodynamic, built to hang under each wing without destroying the Mustang's performance. With 2 tanks installed, the aircraft carries 489 gallons of fuel, more than any single-engine fighter in existence. The range calculations shatter every assumption. With full internal tanks and 2 externals, the P-51 can fly 200 miles. Round trip, with fuel remaining to fight for 30 minutes over the target. It can reach Berlin and return. It's impossible. The laws of physics say so. Every aviation engineer knows you cannot build a single-engine fighter with that kind of range and performance. But the Mustang doesn't care what the textbooks say. In December 1943, the first Mustang groups deploy to England. Bomber crews, accustomed to watching their escorts turn back at the border, now see silver fighters stay with them all the way to target. All the way home. Luftwaffe pilots scramble to intercept, expecting easy kills once the escorts leave. Instead, they face Mustangs diving out of the sun guns, blazing with enough fuel to chase them back to their own airfields. The dynamic shifts. German fighters cannot ignore the escorts, cannot wait for them to leave, must engage immediately, burning fuel, taking losses, losing the initiative. Suddenly, bombers can strike deep and return. Luftwaffe aces scramble to counter, but fatigue, attrition, and dwindling fuel cripple their edge. In spring 1944, Mustang squadrons multiply. Pilots refine tactics. They escort bombers to target, then drop down to strafe airfields, trains, trucks. The Luftwaffe cannot rest, cannot regroup, cannot escape. A handful of tactical masterstrokes, precise ambushes, perfectly timed dives prove the Luftwaffe no longer holds the initiative. Attrition accelerates. German aces fall men with 50, 100, 150 kills, overwhelmed by numbers, by fatigue, by fuel starvation. By May 1944, the Luftwaffe retains air superiority over exactly one place, Germany itself. And even that is fading. Momentum shifts. One aircraft redesigned, re-engined, extended beyond all original specs has rewritten the air war. But the final test still looms. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Can the Allies hold air superiority over Normandy against everything the Luftwaffe has left? June 5th, 1944. Midnight. Across southern England, engines roar to life. Fighters, bombers, transports, over 3,000 aircraft begin the largest single-day air operation in history. The mission: absolute air dominance over the Normandy beaches. No exceptions, no failures. Fighter pilots climb into cockpits, strapping in by flashlight. Ground crews make final checks. Oil fuel guns drop tanks. Everyone knows what's at stake. If the Luftwaffe breaks through, invasion forces will die on the beaches. Io Fiore, U0 AM. The first wave crosses the channel. The night before D-Day, over Normandy, the sky roars with 3,000 Allied aircraft. Fighters slice through flat corridors, protecting paratroopers drifting like fragile seeds. Paratroopers drift down through darkness, suspended beneath silk canopies. Fighters fly above and below them, weaving through flat corridors, hunting for night fighters that never appear. The Luftwaffe is grounded. Fuel shortages, pilot exhaustion, shattered command structure. The Luftwaffe cannot rise. By dawn, Allied fighters own the sky. Spitfires patrol at low altitude, strafing German positions, interdicting reinforcements. Thunderbolts hit coastal defenses, rockets screaming into bunkers. Mustangs fly high, cover scanning for enemy formations that do not come. Bomber streams roll in saturating German defensive lines. Fighters escort them, then dive to hit secondary targets, bridges, supply depots, command posts. The beaches turn red, but the sky stays clear. For the first time in the war, an amphibious landing proceeds without air attack. Troops wade ashore under fighter cover so thick that German soldiers surrender, pointing at the sky, begging not to be strafed. The invasion proceeds. Days pass. The Luftwaffe attempts counterattacks. Small formations. 10, 20 aircraft strafe landing zones. Allied fighters intercept them before they reach the beaches. German pilots flying obsolete equipment with green replacements stand no chance. In July, the breakout from Normandy begins. At Falaise, tactical air forces strike German armor trapped in narrow lanes, precision attacks that collapse an entire army's mobility. Allied tactical air forces shift focus, destroying German armor trapped in the Falaise pocket. Typhoons and thunderbolts dive on columns choked in narrow lanes, rockets and bombs obliterating tanks, trucks, horses, men. German units disintegrate not from ground combat but from air attack. Pilots return with trembling hands, fuel fumes in their lungs, cockpits riddled with shrapnel. Some refuse to speak. Others vomit on the tarmac and climb back into their aircraft for the next sortie. By August, the Falaise pocket closes. 50,000 German soldiers surrender. 10,000 lie dead in burned-out vehicles. The Luftwaffe's last major defensive effort in the West collapses. Allied fighters now roam freely over France, Belgium, the Netherlands. They strafe locomotives, sink barges, destroy anything that moves. The German war machine, strangled from the air, grinds toward paralysis. The air war's decisive moment has arrived. The Luftwaffe cannot rise. The invasion proceeds. In September 1944, Allied armies liberate Paris, drive to the Rhine. Above them, fighters fly unchallenged. The air war is over. The Allies have won, but the cost is written in empty seats, burned aircraft, and 70,000 RAF graves. How many had to die before the sky fell silent? The Luftwaffe fractures. Isolated units retreat eastward, abandoning aircraft on cratered airstrips. Others surrender and place mechanics waving white flags as Allied tanks roll past. Isolated units retreat. Others surrender on cracked airstrips. By late 1944, Germany fields fewer than 1,000 operational fighters, most flown by teenagers with 20 hours of training. Allied air superiority becomes absolute. Allied air dominance enables the liberation of Paris, the push to the Rhine, the opening of every road to victory. Every road to the Rhine opens. Every supply convoy moves without fear. Every bridgehead holds because the sky above stays clear. Veteran pilots rotate home. Veteran pilots return home changed, haunted by empty seats beside them. Johnny Johnson, 38. Confirmed kills, returns to England, promoted, decorated, haunted. He writes letters to families of men who didn't come back, searching for words that don't exist. Douglas Bader, shot down over France, spends the rest of the war in German POW camps, his artificial legs confiscated to prevent escape attempts. He never flies combat again. Fred Christensen survives 100 missions in a Thunderbolt, his aircraft absorbing battle damage that should have killed him a dozen times. He lands for the last time in May 1945, climbs out and walks away without looking back. George Unwin, the pilot who survived the -G bunt flies until war's end. He never forgets the 3 seconds his engine died, the silence before it restarted, the moment he understood survival was never guaranteed. Ground crews dismantle aircraft salvage parts, repaint tail numbers over the names of dead pilots. The machines that won the war, Spitfires, Mustangs, Thunderbolts, Hurricanes, are melted down, sold as scrap, or left to rust in fields across England. The men who flew them scatter. Some become airline pilots, others cannot bear to fly again. They carry the war in nightmares and flinches at loud noises in the refusal to discuss what they did between 1940 and 1945. They won the air, but at a cost written in shattered perspex and burned metal. They won. But victory tastes like ash. The Allied air campaign rewrites military doctrine. The Luftwaffe was utterly defeated. The Allies achieved absolute air superiority, paving the way for D-Day and the liberation of Europe. More than 50,000 American and 70,000 RAF pilots died. Air superiority becomes the foundation of modern warfare. No army moves without it. No navy operates without it. No invasion proceeds until the sky is secured. The technologies forged in desperation: radar networks, long-range escort fighters, supercharged engines, drop-tank-shaped post-war aviation. The Mustang P-51, Spitfire, B-17, and P-47 became historical icons. The P-51 Mustang inspires jet fighter design for decades. Its laminar flow wing becomes standard. Its range and versatility define what a fighter should do. The Spitfire evolves through over 20 variants, serving air forces into the 1950s. Its elliptical wing becomes iconic, a symbol of British resistance. The legacy of the Mighty Eighth remains the foundation of modern air power. The Messerschmitt Me 262. The world's first operational jet fighter arrives too late and in too few numbers to alter the war. But it proves jet propulsion's future. Within 5 years, every major air force pursues jets. Bomber doctrine shifts. The idea of unescorted strategic bombing dies at Schweinfurt. Future wars demand integrated operations. Fighters, bombers, ground support, all synchronized. Radar chains evolve into modern air defense networks. The chain home stations, crude by today's standards, prove that information wins wars. NATO builds on this lesson, constructing continent-spanning early warning systems. Allied innovations, radar chains, superchargers, long-range escort doctrine shape NATO air strategy for generations. The human cost remains staggering. Over 50,000 American airmen die in the European theater. 70,000 RAF personnel never return. Luftwaffe losses exceed 100,000 killed or missing. For every pilot who survives, 3 do not. For every innovation that saves lives, a dozen men die testing it. The men who flew these machines understood something the historians and engineers who came after often miss. The lesson outlives the machines. Air power is not just engines and speed, it is information coordination and human ingenuity under fire. Air power is not engines and guns. It is coordination, information, training, logistics, and above all, human courage stretched to the breaking point and beyond. The aircraft were tools, the pilots were the weapons, and the price they paid purchased freedom for a continent. When the engines finally fall silent, the sky remembers everything. Not the medals or the propaganda films, not the victory parades or the museum exhibits. Not triumph, but sacrifice. Thousands of young men who traded fear for courage and innovation for survival. It remembers 19-year-olds climbing into cockpits knowing the odds. It remembers mechanics working through the night to keep one more fighter airborne. It remembers controllers vectoring pilots towards certain death because someone had to go. The Spitfire's graceful wings, the Mustang's brutal efficiency, the Thunderbolt's unstoppable dive. They were never just machines. They were extensions of the men who flew them, fragile, determined, mortal. The impossible ideas that won the war. Negative G bunts, drop tank retrofits, radar-guided intercepts came from desperation, not genius. Their impossible ideas reshape the world and remind us from men who refused to accept defeat because the alternative was unthinkable. They didn't conquer the sky. They learned to respect it, and in that survival, they rewrote history. The lesson endures, carved into the silence between the clouds. The price of freedom is not power, but the human lives spent to protect it. If you found meaning in their sacrifice, explore the untold stories of the men and machines that shaped our world.